I had the opportunity to sit down with my friend, Matt Fleekop, strength and conditioning coach for Princeton University. Matt holds a Bachelor's of Science in Exercise Science and a Master's degree in Applied Health Physiology. He has interned at Purdue University and EXOS and earned his master's degree while completing a graduate assistantship at Salisbury University. Matt provides great insight into what goes into training multiple sports during the academic calendar within a collegiate setting. In addition, he helps to touch on how his athletes and himself have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. This interview was recorded earlier this spring. Welcome to the Leo Training Podcast, a podcast focused on scientific and real-world expertise on training strategies between your ears, behind the oar handle, on the field and court, and in the strength and conditioning room. I'm your host, Joe DeLeo. I am a strength and conditioning coach, speaker, and lifelong student focused on continuous improvement. Thank you for joining me, and let's roll to today's episode. Matt, welcome to the show.
Joe, thanks for having me, man. It's great to be here. It's been a long time coming since meeting you about a year and a half, 2 years ago. So I'm glad we're finally able to get together and do this.
Yeah, likewise, man. It's crazy. Time flies for sure.
It sure does, man. It sure does.
Awesome. Well, buddy, let's just kick things off. Why don't you share with the audience a little bit about yourself? Talk about kind of your background as an athlete. How you got involved in strength and conditioning, and some of your experience and how you came to work at Princeton.
All right. Yeah. So, growing up, I was a 3-sport athlete. I played hockey, baseball, and basketball. I'm about 5'6" and $160. So basketball wasn't really in my future. I continued playing ice hockey in college at Rollins University. I played there for 2 years. And school-wise, I kind of bounced around at Rowan, choosing different majors, undecided, trying to figure out what I was going to do, what I enjoyed. And I wasn't a great student, but, during my 2 years, I discovered how much I love training and nutrition. And that was a blast for me. I was like, I love this stuff. And I found out about exercise science. So I was like, okay, I love to train. I love nutrition. This stuff is awesome, and now I have a chance to study it. So let's kind of dive in there and let's see where it can take me. My first year in the major, I met Dr. Spencer. She was an awesome woman, still a mentor of mine. A little bit about her, she survived cancer. She competed in bodybuilding competitions. She worked out. She was just such a great person. And she just motivated me from the start. She talked a lot of sense into me, kind of kept me on the right path when I needed it most at that time. And she started a research program called Get Fit, and it was a program to help reduce obesity and metabolic syndrome in people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So she brought me on there to help out, and it was kind of my first real taste of helping people out in this kind of setting. And it was amazing, like working with these people with different disabilities, their caregivers, seeing the effect that we had on them. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. How can I continue to do this? And, just the thought of helping people in this kind of environment and setting, it was awesome to me. So, that was my first glimpse of like personal training, and I loved it. So I was like, okay, this is what I'm into. A couple years later, I graduated from Rowan, and I took an internship at Purdue University. Now this was for me like an eye opener of an experience. Like I walked in there, and my first day I was blown away, man. I was like, I have a lot to learn right now. This is nuts. Dude, it was a new environment, man. Walking in there and seeing these athletes, these Big Ten football players, wrestlers, basketball team, the volleyball girls, everyone. It was like nothing I've seen before. And the coaches, it was the same thing, man. It was an intense environment. It was just intense, and they were getting after it, and I loved it. And I was like, this is amazing. This is sweet. I'm seeing these coaches like push these kids to new levels. The kids are responding. They're training so hard. We're grinding from 5:30, 6 in the morning till late in the afternoon. and it was tough. Like I remember my first week thinking like, I don't know if this is for me right now. Like everything these guys are doing is brand new to me. I didn't feel like I was up to speed with their training, what they were doing, and all that stuff. And, I remember calling home my parents and thinking like, and just talking to them, and they were like, you can't give up. Like, you're all the way out in Indiana from Jersey. You love this stuff. This is what you love to do. It's just a different situation. Like, stick with it. You'll figure it out and get through. And that's what I did. Like, I would come home from the internship and I would just read, research, study, and learn as much as I could so I could get up to speed for the next day of work. And that's what happened. Like, I tell a lot of our interns now, it's like the things we're doing in the weight room are probably different than what you were used to doing in college, right? We first touch weights and we're doing the Arnold Schwarzenegger bodybuilding program. How can we look better and get ready for the beach? And that was my training heading into this. So this was eye-opening for me. But, I always tell them, like, there's two things you kind of need, and it's you have to have personality and be able to connect and relate to the athletes, the coaches, and have thick skin through it all, because you're going to get ripped a few times, and it's just part of it. The coaches are trying to help you just like they're trying to help the athletes. So it's part of that. And you have to be able to work. And, it's going to be early mornings, late nights, and come back and do it again the next day. And if you can't kind of adapt to that, it's going to be tough. But that's an area where I was successful in, and I was able to adapt in different ways and learn a ton there. I mean, it introduced me to what strength conditioning was really about. And that experience kind of led me to my next one. So I finished my internship.
Hey, Matt, so I wanted to ask, because I think you bring up a great point there. You talk about, being charismatic, having personality, and being able to connect with the athletes. That's one really important thing. And then the second thing is just that, that discipline, that work ethic. And you are pointing out early on in your, strength and conditioning career, you identified, I had a lot of work to do in other areas, but these two things I knew I could do well, right? So how does that relate to, those two things as an athlete? And then how is it different, when you go from being an athlete to a coach? But how are they helpful in both environments?
Yeah. Personally, from my experience, I think, I developed the work ethic as an athlete. So, like I mentioned before, I'm a little guy. I was always one of the smaller guys on my team, any team I was on, and I had to work and claw and fight for kind of any position on any team. And I realized that when I was younger. So, playing, I played at pretty high levels growing up. And for me to continue playing at this high level, for me, it was always I had to outwork everyone. I wasn't the most talented. I wasn't the biggest, the fastest, the strongest. But I knew if I put my effort into working, I didn't give up. I had heart and grit and all that stuff. I think that's what separates, an average player from a good player, good to great. And it helps you, kind of level the playing field when you're not as talented as other people. So the work ethic, I think I developed that as an athlete, and also from my parents, like having parents who work hard and grind, and you just see them working every day as you're growing up. You realize that, that was just brought in me. Like, I have to work hard if I want to be successful. And, it was just something I've always done. And as a coach, I think, as a coach, we're not on the field, but we're trying to still better ourselves so we can serve our athletes and our clients. And the more I can learn and develop and get better as a coach, whether it's learning how to lead better, learning more about exercise science, programming, building relationships and culture, the better I can, put myself in those roles, the better my athletes are going to be on the field and in their life overall. So it comes down to like knowing your why, realizing what's important to you, and just kind of, working and executing it. Like, I think now during this quarantine, you really get to see the importance of it, because, we're in a life where, especially as coaches, we're always going. And now we have all this free time, and it's a great opportunity to learn, to develop, to network, to communicate with people. And all it is, quote unquote work. But it's, if it's something you enjoy and you're passionate about it and you love it and you know why you're doing it, it makes it something you look forward to doing every single morning. And it's why we get up at 5 a.m. when, we got nothing to do all day except for hang around and stay inside.
That's right, man. Yeah, we just got to keep scratching that itch, and we're curious, all of us, I think, about learning a little bit more about the human body, and we truly enjoy that part of being able to help people. It's one of the things that just makes the work, the coaching aspect, such a enjoyable and rewarding field to be in. So Matt, from your internship at Purdue, take us on to kind of the next step.
Yeah. So the next step, I came home, I came back to Jersey, and I began working as a personal trainer and interning at Endeavor Sports Performance. So I knew I wanted to go back to school and get a master's degree and get back into college setting, but I didn't have much income. Financially, I wasn't in a great spot, and I still thought I needed to grow more and get more experience as a coach. So I went to Endeavor Sports Performance, which was primarily a hockey facility, which is awesome for me being a hockey player. But it was much different than being at Purdue, a Big Ten college, where we're working with football players, and it's just that collegiate environment. It was a much different environment, but the coaches here at Endeavor, I think they really molded me into the coach I am today. It wasn't the same atmosphere that you get, in most typical college weight rooms, but it was where my personality really fit well, and I felt I developed well here, and I saw just another different side of coaching and how we can connect with athletes on a different level. It ended up being a really awesome experience there. And those guys at Endeavor Sports Performance are awesome. I still keep in touch with them, and they're awesome dudes. And from there, I was there for about a year or so, and then I was offered a GA position at Salisbury down in Maryland. So I earned a master's degree there, studying applied physiology with a specialization in strength conditioning. And in the 2 years there, I worked with Matt Nine, and he's still an awesome mentor of mine. Matt was a great guy. And the other GAs who I got to work with there were all still in the field. We're still coaching at different levels, professional, collegiate. Some of us have been to different countries to coach. So it's been a really cool group that I worked with there, and that we still can kind of connect. But when I was there, I think the coolest part of my graduate assistant position was I found out, who I am as a coach, a leader, a teacher. And I had 2 years there where it was basically just me and the GAs, and we ran the show. So I had to learn, firsthand, like, what's the best way for me to communicate with people? Is it, this way or this way? Am I going to be Coach A or Coach B? And I was able to find out, through my 2 years there, what worked well, what didn't, and just kind of grow and learn. And it was 2 awesome years that I really, I'm really grateful that I had those 2 opportunities. And within our time there, we had to do an internship. So I took another internship, and this one was down in Frisco, Texas, where I was at EXOS, which is an awesome facility. It was a great internship there. I learned a ton, awesome coaches to work with. And my primary responsibility there was working with the college and the NFL guys, preparing them for the upcoming season. And when I was here, I was out in Frisco, Texas. So we had a lot of Dallas Cowboy athletes, and I'm a Philly guy. So I brought in my Eagles attitude for them. I told them, go Birds. I said, I'm going to do everything I can to help you guys out this summer. But once that football season hits, can't say I'm going to be cheering for your team to beat us. But it was an awesome experience there. And again, like, just working with top-notch college athletes and professionals, it's a good way to test yourself. And it's like a sink or swim type mode. Like, am I going to be confident enough as a young coach to step in and help these NFL guys and correct them and coach them and be hard on them when I need to. And I was like, it wasn't easy. It was something I had to do to get uncomfortable and get out of that comfort zone. But as you take those steps as a young coach, I feel like that's when you really develop and you become a better coach, a better leader. And it set me up for the next year at Salisbury, but also, landing a first job and getting me ready to handle bigger tasks that, eventually led to me being here at Princeton. But, my time in EXOS was awesome. And from there, I went back to Salisbury. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Just for context, what year So you finished up your master's, you did the internship at EXOS. What year was that? Just a context for the audience.
That was 2015.
Okay.
Yep. So about 5 years ago. And from there, after graduating grad school, the day after we graduated, got my diploma, all that fun stuff, I drove down to Florida to start my first real job, first big boy job as a head strength coach at Rollins College, which is awesome, man. That was really thrown into the fire. I had 14 teams, one assistant that helped me out. He was awesome, but it was a crazy show. So I get there, and our weight room, it's not even a weight room. It's basically the second level of the basketball court. We push the bleachers back, and we put 6 racks out on this rubber flooring, and that's our gym. When the school had like big events, we would have to move the racks out so they could pull the bleachers back in. So that was the setting we were in. And again, as a young coach, being, I guess I was 24, 25 at the time, having to get super creative, out of my comfort zone again, working with 14 different sport teams, sports, like rowing. I never worked with a rower before. From rowing to lacrosse, soccer, baseball, basketball, you have all these different sports. And it's a 1- and 2-man show, and we're just rocking and rolling. And it was awesome. It was an awesome experience having to work with almost 200 athletes. I lived in that weight room, like I said, 5 a.m. till probably 8 p.m. Almost every single day, just the way the schedule was. But the cool thing was I had a really good experience there of learning the importance of talking to the sport coaches themselves. That's something I never really had done as much. As a GA at Salisbury, I didn't do it a ton. But now I really saw the value of building a relationship with the sport coaches, kind of talking on the same level as them and trying to see what they see on the field and trying to speak the same language so they could buy into what I'm doing as a 25-year-old in charge of their team in the weight room.
So Matt,
go ahead.
I think you just hit on some really, really important things. So two questions for you. The first one is, first, head strength job. You're in a very unique situation with some of those constraints in terms of the training environment. You're working with a lot of teams, and your gym is actually kind of literally changing. So you've got to, basically expand and collapse that room around the respective sporting events. So, one, what did that kind of teach you as a coach, and how to be creative and adaptable, on the fly? And then the second question is, how did you, what are some of the benefits you started to see with taking the time to sit down with the individual sports coaches and communicate with them?
Yeah, no, those are awesome questions. To answer your first one, I think, when you're a young coach and you're growing up and you're reading all the science and you're going through the exercise science program at school, you're taught like, this is periodization. This is what happens. This is what you do. This is your 12-week cycle. And then, next thing happens. So that's not how it works in the real world, obviously. I just learned you have to be fluid in your programming, your ideas. You have to think outside the box. You have to get creative, and you have to think about plan B, C, and D, because there's a good chance plan A and B don't happen. So you always have to be prepared.
That's right.
Or else you're gonna be, like having one of those oh crap type moments where there's 30 kids in here, another team is walking in 10 minutes, and you're scrambling like a chicken with their head cut off. So I just learned you have to be fluid and adaptable. And just because your sheet has one thing on it, it doesn't mean that's what you have to kind of do. And I think a really important thing for young coaches to think about and realize is that, it's not about the exercises. It's more about the adaptations that we're looking for. So if you're looking for a specific adaptation, there's a million different ways you can get that adaptation. It's not, if you want to, we can just talk about, developing lower body strength. There's plenty of different options outside of back squatting. Or, if you're looking for power, you don't have to do a hang clean. There's just different options, different ways to skin the cat. And I realized that pretty young. And I think that still helps me now, to this day, realizing that the adaptation is what I'm after. And I can plug and play different exercises to fit that adaptation. It's not a strict template. And then your next question, it's awesome. Like being able to build a relationship with a sport coach, and I can't say how important that is. And it's still something I do now with our coaches. Just showing up at practice and hearing how they communicate with the athletes and hearing the terms they use. You hear how the coach describes a movement, whether they're trying to say get lower or rotate. You just hear the jargon that they use, and you could start to use that in the weight room with your athletes, or you can talk to the coach and ask them why do they say this and what do they even mean by it sometimes. But it's so important, and I think just building that relationship with the coach, it shows them that you're invested into the program. You're not just invested into how strong the athlete is getting or how much faster they're getting. You're invested into the team and into the people, which is the biggest thing. I mean, the program is the program. And to be honest, I think a lot of our athletes, they're in college, right? They're going to get stronger almost no matter what they do. They can get faster no matter what they do for the most part, as long as they're doing it safely. But I think it's when we invest in them as individuals and we invest into the coach, into the whole program, that's when we see a whole new side of things and we really bring out the most of everyone. And I think those are the kind of the most important and biggest things we have to do as strength coaches.
I love it, man. Couldn't have said it any better. You hit on those things beautifully. So you're at Rollins. When did you start and end at that position, and when did you begin at Princeton? So just again, kind of time stamp for the audience.
Yep. So I was at Rollins for about a year and a half, and as that half year was approaching year two, a position to open up at Princeton University. And I saw the position and I was like, it would be amazing if I could, end up back in Jersey, close to the family and all that stuff. So I applied. I was fortunate enough to get a call back and an interview there, and it went really well. So I ended up at Princeton about 3 years ago. So I would say it was 2017, around that time. And started at Princeton. And right now I'm working with football, men's lacrosse, women's ice hockey, men's soccer, men's and women's tennis. And my first year at Princeton, I worked with our rowing and fencing teams. So again, my first year at Princeton, I was working with two sports that I wasn't super familiar with. I'd never trained a fencer before. I had no idea what even went into fencing. And rowing, I went from, the rowers at Princeton are a different animal, man. Those guys and girls, they're legit. They're powerhouses. And, I remember my first day walking in there and seeing the boathouse rocking and rolling and what it was like. And I was blown away. I was like, this is different. This is awesome. This is a machine. It's a factory right now. And you've got like 150 people just moving in and out. Boats are being pulled in. People are screaming. It was an awesome experience. I was like, this is crazy, and I'm all about it. So let's rock and roll.
I love it. Yeah, it's the energy at a boathouse. There's nothing like it. It is almost like a mini ecosystem of a state every day, man, for sure.
It is, and even at Princeton, we say the boathouse is like a different entity from the whole campus. It's just different when you're you just feel different when you're in that boathouse.
Awesome. So year one was rowing and fencing, and then you said from there in the second year you started working with hockey, lacrosse, and I think you said football, right?
Yeah, football, men's soccer, and both of our tennis teams.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's definitely a wide range of sports, which has its pros and cons. The great part is you get to work with so many different athletes, so many different sports. The hard part is that you work with so many different sports and so many different athletes. So it's hard to dive into one or two sports as much as you really like to. But I think all coaches need to experience kind of working with a variety of teams, sports, and athletes to really start to understand, what goes into that specific sport or those athletes. If you always, you only coach one sport your whole life, that could be all you know. And you're kind of stuck inside that box, whereas you coach 5-6 different teams of sports, of athletes. You see so many different things, and you learn that much more as a coach. And it gets you, I think you're forced outside of your comfort zone again, and it really gives you a chance to grow and develop.
Yeah, man, that is so important. I couldn't agree with you more. In the last 2.5 years, working for Lawrence Memorial Hospital Sports Performance Center, I went kind of, focusing on niche of rowing, and in the last 2.5 years working with pretty much just like you, every athlete of every sport, football, baseball, lacrosse, ice hockey, tennis, softball, baseball. You just learn so much more about the demands of all those different sports, and sort of you start to see, little patterns and tendencies from athletes within those sports. You pick up on things. It just rounds you out as a coach. It makes you better. So it's really, really good for development, especially in the younger years.
Couldn't agree more with you.
Awesome, man. So I think, we're going to shift gears a little bit here. We're going to get into, and you started to touch on this, is just training and working with all these different sports, and how that may differ. And so I think before we get into more of the details there and the nuts and bolts, I think taking one step back, because you've worked in a ton of different environments, right? You're several years experience in the collegiate environment, but you've also kind of worked in a sports performance centers, private, for Spectrum and EXOS. So first question I got for you is, what's the similarities? What are the differences between those environments, and how does that factor into coaching? Like, what adjustments do you have to make on a maybe day-to-day, week-to-week, or across the year basis?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think working in the sports performance setting, one of the things you always have to remember is not only the athletes are kind of paying you, like they're paying money to come see you 3-4 times a week, 5 times a week. So it's you're serving them, you're serving their parents, and the experience you give them, they've got to want to tell their parents that, hey, I love working with Coach Matt. He's awesome. I want to keep going to see him. So I think that's super important when you're in the private setting, is knowing that people are paying to come see you. When you're at the college setting, they almost have to come see you. Right. All right, this is your strength coach. You guys have lift at 8 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Have fun. So I think that's like one of the biggest differences that you have to realize, between the two settings. And there's more of it's a similarity as well as a difference. Like there's a sales point in being in the private setting for some settings where you have to sell yourself a little bit. And, it's the same in the coaching in the college setting where, you're selling who you are as a person. And, I always feel like every day is a job interview, and you want to put on your best interview every single day and be your very best. So people want to come in, they want to see you, and ultimately they want to work hard for you. So I think that at standpoint, they're a little similar and a little different. But the biggest difference that I think is the schedule, right? I mean, in a sports performance setting, and especially in the summertime, you might get athletes for 12 weeks, the whole summer, 4 or 5 days a week. They might come in every single day at the same time and come see you. In the college setting, especially at Princeton, it's a very tough schedule. It's probably the biggest challenge we face is the scheduling. We don't get really more than 5-6 weeks at a time with our athletes, in one training block. So in the summer, where you have a full 12 weeks with them, 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. every single day, we get maybe 2-3 days a week for maybe 6 weeks for maybe an hour every session. So just the time is different. The amount of break periods they have in college with exams, finals, midterms, holidays, semester breaks, holiday breaks, it makes the scheduling very tough and different. So you, as a coach, you have to, again, get creative and kind of prioritize where you need to be, when you need to get there, and what's the safest way to get there.
Yeah. We'll get into some of those details as we get more into the training, but you touched on some really key points there, and that'll factor into periodization, I think, later on in the conversation. Yeah. So Matt, coming back into kind of more on training, and So we kind of went from more the different environments, different ecosystems, of those two. Now kind of talking more from a training, coaching philosophy standpoint, right?
Yep.
What are the things that you got to prioritize across, in your experience working with all these different sports when it comes to program design?
Yeah, so I mean, if you looked at a lot of my team's programming and saw what we did in the weight room, it's actually really similar, and you'd be like, wow, that's what your tennis team is doing is similar to what your lacrosse team does. The movements look similar. Why is that? So I mean, basically, and I'll give you a little layout of kind of what we do. We run and sprint, we jump, we hop, we bound, we throw medicine balls. And I think if you look at a sport, they pretty much do all of those things. You run, you sprint, you jump, throw, hop, bound, you throw things, you rotate. So that's what we do. And going back to one of the first books I've read was some of Dan John's stuff, and he talks about his big five: the squat, push, pull, hinge, and carry. And those are your five main movements, right? So all of our teams, that's what we do. We do those five main movement patterns, and we just kind of vary the exercise based on what the team is ready for. So if a team isn't ready for a back squat or a safety bar squat, maybe they're doing a goblet squat, or maybe they're doing a front squat. Maybe they're doing a split squat, just some variation of the movement in a similar pattern. And I'm a big time believer in single leg movements. So we do a ton of that. And I think at the end of the day, we also have to realize, our goal as strength and conditioning coaches is to build athletes who can perform in their sport. So we're not building Olympic lifters. We're not building power lifters, bodybuilders. We're building an athlete who has to be able to do a lot of different things at different speeds, different tempos. And if we don't give them all of the, tools to do that, then we're doing them a disservice. So, that's one of my big goals, is to provide them with everything they need to do in the gym that they're going to see on the field, and get them ready for gameplay. And, even talking about injury prevention, it's similar throughout all the sports I work with. Some sports have greater demands on certain parts of their body than others. But for the most part, I look at the body from the ground up and think, what are the main injuries that we see on the field? And what can we do in our setting, whether it's in the gym or out on the turf, to help prevent things from happening? And basically, I look at it and say, okay, I have to prepare them for the demands of the sport. So if we talk, lower body, looking at like the ankles, knees, hips, hamstrings, groins, we do a ton of single leg work. We do a ton of isometrics, a ton of eccentrics, plyometrics, where they're landing and decelerating on one leg, sprinting, where they have to break down, a ton of direct groin work, hamstring work. I think what a lot of people think injury prevention, and they only focus on, quote unquote, prehab and mobility and corrective type exercises. Those are all great, and there's a time and place for them, and I certainly utilize those a lot. But I also think that, the demands they see in the game, we have to use in the gym. And, if they can't sprint in a controlled setting and decelerate and break down, in our weight room session, then how are they going to do that in a game? And if they can't jump and land on one leg with me, they're going to struggle with it even more on the field. So I think our goal is to prepare them for those situations that they see on the field.
I love it, man. That's great. Beautiful.
Yep.
Okay. So that kind of, I think from a philosophical standpoint, that was great, and the thing that I'm hearing from you, this probably won't get either one of us a ton of, YouTube likes or likes on Instagram or anything, but it's just, doing the fundamentals really, really well and expanding that foundation and building upon it.
Yeah. I mean, I always preach to my student athletes is like, be great at the basics, right? I remember when I was an intern at EXOS, there's a quote from Brett Bartholomew, who's awesome, by the way, great guy. And he said, do the simple things savagely well. And that quote stuck with me. And 5-6 years later, I'm still saying the quote to my athletes, almost every single session: do the basics well, do the basics well. And I think from that standpoint, like if you can hammer the fundamentals and do those really well, you're probably ahead of 99% of the people already. And then from there, if you want to get a little fancier, get a little creative, step outside that fundamental box, you can. But before you step out of the box, make sure you know how to do everything inside of it. And that's huge for me.
Yeah, man, I love it. For me, I think one of the things to kind of just share with you, because I think it's really interesting and great insight talking about all the different experience you've had is, when I started at LMH, my first year there, probably about, I'd say somewhere 6 to 9 months in, I hit this point where I'm like, I had a little bit of like kind of self-doubt, and I'm like, oh, am I doing the right things? Like, I see a lot of similarity across all of my programs. And I'm working with, all these different athletes from various sports. Am I doing the right thing? Am I best serving them? And, continue to read and talk to people and stuff. And I think the point I'm making is I became very comfortable with, teaching and coaching the basics and doing them at a very high level and being okay with that. Especially when you're working with predominantly middle school and high school athletes, because that's what you're going to spend probably 90 to 95% of your time doing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And especially with younger athletes, I think that's the most important thing. It's just those fundamental movement patterns. Can they do those well? And once they can, you can kind of load them up a little bit and develop some cool qualities. But yeah, there's I don't know. I feel the same way. I look at my programs and they're similar from team to team, just, how we progress and advance, and the loading might be different, but, overall the movement patterns, like you said, they're similar across the board. And, whether you're playing soccer, lacrosse, tennis, or hockey, you're doing similar movement patterns, just in a different way or in a different field or on a different surface. So it's all kind of similar. And if you could do those things well, you're probably going to be in a good spot.
Right. Yeah. And then you make them a better athlete, they're going to probably do better in their respective sport.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's huge too. Like, help these kids become athletes. And we kind of talked about this at some point before, when I get younger athletes, freshmen, and I'm going through our, basic dynamic warm up, and I'm watching people skip and do these movement patterns that are so fundamental that we used to do, back in grade school. I see them skip with the same arm, same leg, and it looks like a baby deer, trying to figure out how to walk for the first time. And I'm like, these are fundamental patterns, man. Just skip, figure it out. Let's go.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a great point, right? And that kind of segues us into the second part of our topics and questions here is, and I imagine this has got to be probably one of the biggest challenges that any collegiate university strength and conditioning coach has to deal with is, you get incoming freshmen every year. So you get this brand new group that you're working with across all the different sports. And within, that entire freshman class across all the sports, the ability level and background of those athletes, you might have a complete novice, or you might have somebody that's, a gym rat, right? And so I'm just curious. I would love to hear, have you been in those situations where in one training session with a sport, you've got such various abilities across the spectrum, and how do you adjust on the fly?
Yeah, that's a great point. And one thing I have seen over the past couple of years is more and more kids are coming in with at least some type of weight room experience, whether it's a good experience or bad experience. They've at least been in the weight room and have seen what kind of goes on a little bit. So I think that helps a little bit, but ultimately, especially for sports who, maybe weightlifting isn't in their culture, maybe say tennis or soccer, where they didn't have to strength train to continue playing at a high level. I think for those athletes, you want to make it fun for them, and you want to make it enjoyable. So I think you have to have that, just have that kind of personality where this is going to be the best hour of their day. And, in that moment, it's not about how strong they're getting and how fast they're getting. You just want them to enjoy the moment. And when they leave, they say, I want to go back to the gym and I want to train with Coach Matt and the team. Like that's what I want. And then from there, once they're enjoying it, just emphasize proper movement patterns, right? You want them to move well. You have to spend time teaching them and celebrate the small wins. Like if they can improve one thing on the day, tell them that they improved it, celebrate that win, and the next session, improve something else. And the last area I think is important is we do want to load them fairly quickly. So we want to make sure they can safely do the movements. But, if you watch someone do a body weight squat, a goblet squat, and a front squat, all three movements look different. And watch someone clean with a PVC pipe and watch them clean with a barbell, it looks different. So for me, if I only let someone body weight squat, and it might not ever look right, but if I give them a goblet or a kettlebell and they hold it in a goblet position, it might look like a perfect squat and they might have no issue dropping down into it. So I think we do want to load them and give them a chance to kind of figure out how to move and understand their body a little bit. It comes back to them being ready for it. And when they are ready, we can progress them as is. But I like to load them within the, probably the first or second session and let them start expressing their body and figure out how to move and how their body should handle some different loads.
Yeah, great points there about just those three variations across the squat pattern and how, you swap out a different piece of equipment and you're going to see a little bit of a different movement from that same athlete, and how, a goblet squat can clean it up a little bit, and body weight squat might not look as pristine or sharp.
Yeah.
And Matt, coming back around, so across all your sports, right, where you've got tons of experience working with all these different sports we've covered. When we're talking about athlete education and well-rounded development, right? So what are kind of the fundamentals? Doesn't matter what sport. So you have a rower who's sitting down in a boat, or you've got, a field athlete like a soccer player. What are the basics, in your opinion, that all athletes should be able to do?
Absolutely. So for me, I would love to get a freshman who can squat with no issue, like just perform a great squat where their chest is up tall, their knees are flexed, they're down in a deep squat, and they can own that position and sit down there and be nice and comfortable to have a conversation. To be able to do a lunge, whether it's reverse lunge, walking lunge, a split squat, have some type of, body awareness, a push up, a pull up, a proper plank where their hips are tucked underneath of them. And, it doesn't look like their low back is making the letter U. And again, those basic movements like skipping, jumping, and running. And I think the biggest movement that I see kids struggling with is the hip hinge. Being able to hinge their hips, push their butt back, drop their chest when they need to, and basically find their hamstrings. Like they have trouble really finding their hamstrings, shifting their weight back while still keeping their toes on the floor. Just doing a great hip hinge. I see a lot of kids struggle with that, and sometimes it might take them 3-4 months to actually figure that movement out. But I think it's one of the most important movements to spend time teaching, because everything stems from that movement. Be able to hinge your hips back and get into a power position and go from there. Yeah,
that's the cornerstone of the athletic stance right there.
Absolutely.
Great stuff, man. So, you touched on this a little bit before, just about the NCAA calendar versus the EXOS environment. And you've got so many probably more variables that are outside of your direct control in a collegiate university setting, with exams, athletic competition, plus travel schedule, holidays, or breaks, training trips, those types of things. So, you were saying, I think, 5 to 6 weeks might be, and that's a long stretch where you're working with a team, right? So when we start looking at some of those challenges and constraints kind of placed on the strength and conditioning coach, and then you look at a traditional periodization model, where you're looking at maybe 4 or 6, 8-week blocks or 12-week block, right? So how did you go from reading any of these textbooks and looking at like the theory and then going, oh, okay, well, here's my real life situation. How did you adapt to that? And how was your mindset, say maybe, 5-6 years ago, earlier in your career versus now? Have you become much more flexible?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the flexibility is one of the biggest areas where I've seen my coaching game improve over the years. It's just, like I talked about before a little bit, it's just because it's on the sheet and it's on the card, it doesn't mean that's what you need to do on that day. And I'm glad I learned that years ago, because it's still true with me right now. You might hear my dog; he's growling a little bit in the background right now. He gets protective.
I thought that was a motorcycle.
No, he gets a little excited when people walk by and starts to growl at them. He's our watch dog. But but yeah, going back to that, man, like just having flexibility within your programming is huge. And I think one of the biggest things I've realized when it comes to this is you've got to do a lot more reading outside of what's in your textbook, and a lot more reaching out to people, networking, and what's in the textbook isn't always what's going to happen in real life. And the more you can talk to people who have been around the block and have tons of experience and have worked with different sports, different athletes, different settings, you kind of get an appreciation for all the different ways there is to skin the cat. And you have to dive into the research and realize that you can develop qualities in a certain amount of times through different exercises. And once you start to have all these different, I guess, experiences and thoughts and things you've studied, you can kind of get a greater idea of how can I get someone stronger when I have 3 weeks, or I got 4 weeks with this team before we go on a break. What's the best way that I can improve their work capacity in 4 weeks? Like, that's my goal. And how can I do it without losing too much of this quality while still, developing one? So again, I think it comes down to being able to learn a lot on your own and research and talk to people. And then, ultimately you have to get out on the floor and be a great coach and execute it.
Yeah, 100%. And, with you being at Princeton, and I got a chance to, take a tour of the facilities and grab a training session with you a couple summers back when I was there. I have to imagine too, you're in an environment where, you can, ask questions to your colleagues, because you guys have pretty decent sized staff when it comes to the strength and conditioning staff. That's accurate, right?
Yep. So we have a staff of 6 coaches right now, which is awesome. So you have 5-6 people who you can bounce ideas, conversations, tons of different stuff. And right now, even this morning, we're sitting around emailing each other, texting each other, just different ideas about our football program, and just having, it's a mini network. It's 6 people who you become friends with and you become close with each and every day. And it's people who you can look for advice, to be straight up honest with you and tell you if something you're doing is insane or why are you doing it, question you, make you think and learn. So it's awesome to have that to have a staff that's like that. And that's one of the biggest things I really like about Princeton is we have a big staff, and it's just people who are going through what you're going through every single day, who you spend hours with every single day. And ultimately, they become your family and they help you get better. And it's great to have that here.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So specifically talking about a couple of the sports that, you've worked with over the last couple of years at Princeton. So, we'll use football as an example. The schedule, the season set heading into that fall. So exactly, your dates of competition for the games and if they're going to be home or away. And then you got something like, and the primary season for that's in the fall. And then you have hockey and rowing where they do compete in the fall, but their main season's in the spring and it goes pretty long, so what are the challenges? Let's use those 3. What are challenges around each one? And then what are, some of the benefits of kind of knowing the schedule heading in and, again, challenges with a longer spring season heading into the summer? Yeah,
so like you mentioned, football is great. We know when we're playing, It's every Saturday. We know when the season starts. We know when our last game is. So you can kind of prepare knowing, what's happening. And it's so routine, right? We play Saturday. We lift on Sunday. We're off Monday. We lift Tuesday. And the week goes on and on. So each week is pretty much the same for those 10 weeks. There's almost minimal deviation from that schedule, which I think is huge for the kids, especially here at Princeton when they have such a big academic demand. Have something that's set in schedule, and every week it doesn't change for the most part. Hockey and rowing, yeah, they're definitely much different. They compete in the fall and they go deep into the spring, so it's a super long season. And sometimes like the rowing schedule, the travel is insane. They travel all over. They might row multiple times in the same day at certain points, and sometimes they'll row back-to-back days. Hockey might have a game on a Tuesday and then play the next Friday, Saturday, and come back again and play on Tuesday. So in that situation, you're playing like 7 games or 3, 4, 5 games in like 8 days, and that's brutal in that kind of a sport. So a big challenge is as a strength coach is picking and choosing when you're going to train hard, when you have to back off. Realizing that you might not be able to get what you want to get in, this week. But, like I said before, I think ultimately our goal is to get them ready to compete, in the water, on the ice, on the field. So, if we don't set our ego aside in that sense and we try to get a little too crazy in the weight room, we're ultimately setting them up for failure or not performing well or possibly an injury. And, that's the last thing that we can do.
Yeah, no, excellent points there. So here's my question to you. So, you've got your card, your template, a game plan for the day, and football, like you said, you've got a pretty mapped out schedule for the fall season. The team, the athletes can get into a routine, which definitely makes it a little bit easier, for you to plan. And then you say you got something like with rowing and hockey, in addition to their travel and competition schedule, plus academics, and then their practice schedule. Have you had situations where, all right, this is what I want to do with them today. This is how we're going to plan. And then you walk into the room and you can just tell either by, body language or the energy level that, man, these guys they're tired, or, I need to scrap what I had planned today and audible.
Yeah, absolutely. And that happens a lot. I mean, as a coach, I think that's one of the biggest things we have to do is be able to read the room, read the athletes. And if they've played a Friday, Saturday, and they walk into the gym Monday morning and they look like zombies, and the warm up is kind of sloppy, and you can just tell that they're not in a great spot, then I think you make the decision to just because you have 85% on the sheet doesn't mean you need to. You make the call. Okay, hey, I know the sheet says this. We're going to go back to about 60% and hit a couple sets of 3 and get you guys in and out of here. Something like that, or you do something fun for the day. You just got to know when to hold them and when to fold them. And other times you might think they play Friday, Saturday, they have 2 big games, they're going to be zombies. And Monday morning they walk in and they're bouncing off the walls. They seem fired up. You talk to them and they're like, "No, we want to get after it today, coach. We want to lift some weights." All right. Well, you guys seem good to go. You look good. We're going to push it today, and I think we're ready for it. So you just got to kind of read the room a little bit and make that call on the fly and believe in whatever decision that you go with, because if you tell them that we're backing down and you don't give them a good reason why, or you don't explain your reason, that it's just not. I just don't believe that that's a good situation to be in. And if you do say, what, I don't care that you guys are tired, we're going 85% because we need to, and this is what I say goes. I also think that's a terrible way to get your kids to believe in you and trust you, and they're not going to believe you have their best interest in their hands.
Yeah, I think you bring up some really salient points there in just terms of having to adapt on the fly. And there's arguments probably for both. Like, if it's game day, or race day, and it's a competition day, regardless of how you feel, unless you're like sick or out with an injury, you're going to have to be able to compete on that day. So there's a little bit, I think, to being able to have to respond, to make your body kind of work through the days where you're not feeling 100%. But at the same time, to your point, I think if they're coming off of, multi days of competition or games, and they walk in Monday morning and they're zombies, pulling back the reins, that has the best interest at heart of making sure the athlete's in the best position long-term throughout the season to keep them healthy and performance-wise, they're doing their best.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, if they see that you truly do care about them, they're probably going to come into the weight room excited to see you, and they're going to want to go to bat for you every single session. They're in the gym training with you. And I think, no matter what, the most important thing of all, and, everyone says this, you've heard it 1,000 times, but you have to have buy-in from your athletes. And I think that starts with you as a person and as a coach. And if you want kids, athletes, clients, whoever it is, to kind of buy in to you and believe in you and be able to, go to bat with you, you have to be a great person, for one, first and foremost. You have to be a great person and truly care about them. It can't be about you. It's not your show. It's their show. It's about them. And, when you invest in them and you get to know them as people, you get to talk to them about their families, where they come from, things they're interested in. You find out some of their hobbies, what their major in school is, what they're studying, and where they're interning. When you get to know these things about them and they see that you're truly invested in them, and you want to get to know them as a person, not just as a rower, not just as a football player, as a hockey player, they trust you and they believe in you. And I think that's huge. And, continuing with that, kind of just the buy-in side of things. I really believe you have to have fun in the weight room, and you have to make it fun for them. As strength and conditioning coaches, performance coaches, like, we're in this field, a big reason because we love the gym. We love to be in there. We love training. We love to lift, run, jump, all that stuff. These athletes, they might not like to lift. They might hate to be in the gym. And, for someone like that, you have to make it fun for them and have a good time in there, be a bright spot, put a smile on, and enjoy the moment. And, it's something I tell a lot of our interns is we've got the best job in the world, right? We're in a weight room with college students having a great time, lifting weights. Music is blast. Like I don't know. For me, it doesn't get any better than that. And it's a great spot to be every day. So, have fun, enjoy it, and kind of be in the moment with them. And I think when you do those things, man, they really buy into it. They like being in the gym. They have a good time, and it's huge, and it's just contagious. Like, being a positive person is contagious, and I think athletes see that and they enjoy being around you.
Yeah, man, you can hear the enthusiasm in your voice when you think and talk about it. It's great. It's awesome to hear you describe the coaching environment and working with all the athletes. So are there, do you have any advice for maybe some younger coaches or things that you found have been helpful to, one, make it fun, make sure you're approachable as a coach, that athletes are open to, going up and communicating with you, and to building buy-in? Like, what do you try to do to make sure that you're checking those boxes for your athletes?
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of touched on it a little bit, just getting to know them, right? Getting to know them is such a big part of it, and actually being interested in it. Because a lot of times people can ask you questions and they hear you, but they don't listen to what you're saying, and they can't respond back, or they might not remember it. So not only do you have to ask the questions and hear it, but you have to listen to it, comprehend it, and, be able to have continuing conversations. Because, if I ask you, do you have a brother or any siblings? And you tell me on Monday, and then Wednesday we have the same conversation, and Friday we do again. It's like, dude, you're asking me questions and you're not listening. So I think you have to listen to them. And that's huge. And again, be a positive person. So, every time I have a team walk in, I've got a big smile on my face. I'm usually excited. I have something goofy I say to them. I can be loud, energetic. And, when they walk in, I want them to, not worry about the exam they just took or not worry about the problem they're having with their boyfriend or girlfriend. I want them to be like, all right, this is an hour. I get to focus up. I get to hang with my teammates. I get to be with coach. It's going to be a great time. I'm going to get better today. And I just think we can have such an impact on them by being positive, putting a smile on, and getting them to just to have a good time in the gym. Like I keep saying, it's a great time. It's a great place to be. And my advice for young coaches is to be genuine in who you are. Right. I talked about my 2 different internships when I was at Purdue at a big time school in a football program. And it was a ton of screaming, a ton of in your face coaching and all that stuff, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. And my athletes will certainly see me screaming, getting crazy and all that stuff. But then when I was in Endeavor, it was a much more, I guess, softer spoken setting. And there wasn't as much screaming in your face going on. It was more like, I'm going to demo something, explain it. Here's why we're doing it. And, you see the athletes do it perfectly. And that was it. And it was simple, and I think being able for me to realize that that's also who I am as a coach, and that is totally okay. And I'm genuine in that being me, then it's huge. Like I'm comfortable in my skin. And for young coaches, like be genuine, be comfortable in your skin and be positive. Those are kind of my 3 big things right there.
Excellent. All right, let's talk a little bit about in-season training. So, we touched on the 3 sports: football, hockey, rowing. So more specifically, utilizing, micro dosing. You might have those athletes anywhere from 1 to 3 days a week. So what are some of the things, physiological qualities you may try to emphasize if you only have them, say, for, 1 to 3 sessions a week? And then, do you try to give a little bit more flexibility to the athletes in terms of letting them have some say in what they're going to do, that type of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So in season, and I think as strength coaches, we also have to realize that we're managing stress. Like that's what we do. We are stress managers. That's a big part of it. And at Princeton, these kids are truly student athletes first. Their scholastic demands are insane here. So just realizing that's one bucket of stress. We have, their student athlete, all the social stressors of being a college kid, all that stuff. Then you have your head coach, your parents, your actual sport and competitions, and then weight training is again another stressor. So we have all these different buckets that are getting filled, and we have to make sure that things we're doing in the gym aren't overflowing buckets, and also be aware of the other things and be able to have conversations with kids. So I think in season that is huge. And like you mentioned, getting it more into the training side of it, we usually get 1 to 3 days a week with the kids in season. If we're fortunate enough to have 3, it's huge. And if not, usually 2 is kind of where we're at with that. Yes, microdosing, that's huge. Basically believing more isn't always better. And sometimes if all we need is 30 minutes to get a great warm up in, get our main work in, hit some quote unquote corrective exercises and get them out of there to where they need to be next. So I'm a big fan of that in season. And I think we're able to do that mainly because of the work we do in our off season. In the off season, when we train hard, we build work capacity, we have a huge engine, we develop a great base of strength. We're introduced to all of the power exercises that we're going to do, the jumping, the plyometrics, the sprinting. We're basically building them so that they're prepared for the season. And then once we get in season, we can cut what we're doing in half and, still have a huge benefit from the training. And I think that's a big part of it. You can't use your in season as a time to make up for the things we didn't do in the off season and try all these new fancy or different things and different methods of programming. The off season, we have to build them, and the in season, we have to make sure that all the work we did can translate onto the field. So from a periodization programming standpoint, I'm a big believer in concurrent training. So we're still going to touch on all of those main training qualities and adaptations. Just we'll emphasize different ones at different points of the year. So we're early in the season, we might only do a little bit of power work, quote unquote power work, and strength. Maintaining our strength and building that up might be a focus. And as we get deeper and deeper into the season, strength is less of a priority for us, and it might be more on power, speed, velocity, and that realm of the spectrum. So just a snapshot into our week. We'll have one day where it's a max, quote unquote, max effort day, which is our strength day early in the week. And we'll usually do a loaded type of jump, max effort squat variation, hit our accessories and hit our correctives. And then day 2, our second day of the week, is more of our speed, power. I look at it as like a tune-up for the weekend, more or less. And we'll sprint. We'll do some type of dynamic effort lift, some accessories, prehab, correctives, and they're ready to go for the weekend and play their sport. You touched on an exercise library and giving the athletes a little bit of autonomy. I think that is huge. So in the off season, we build a huge library. They get to know what we're doing and understand it. And in season, at certain points of the year, I'll give them an option if do they want to do a safety bar split squat, or do they want to do a dumbbell split squat? Do they want a trap bar deadlift, or do they want to do an RDL? What do they want to do? What do they feel more comfortable with? And I tell them the goal, like, today is our strength day. I want you to comfortably and safely be able to load up some good weight, hit a solid set of 3 and move on, where you're not going to be too sore and taxed. And if they choose one exercise over the other, because that's what works for them, then that's totally okay with me. And ultimately, I just want to have them, give them a little bit of say into what we're doing, so they understand their body. They can get feedback onto what works, what doesn't. And I think that's big again in the whole big buy-in process.
Yeah, Matt, that was great. I mean, you covered a ton there in the last few minutes. A lot of detail, a lot of depth. Just to clarify on a couple of things, when you're talking about, excuse me, when you're talking about concurrent training, and how you may focus on different physiological qualities depending on the time of the year. For sports, say, let's use football as an example. Are you, at the end of those sessions, are you still doing conditioning work? Are you having them do or any sprinting or things in terms of work capacity? Or if they're in season, they're getting enough of that from practice?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in season, with football, we don't do any real sprinting in season, and especially towards the end of the session. But with my hockey and lacrosse teams, I will sprint them 1 to 2 times a week in the very beginning of our sessions. Lacrosse will sprint usually on that second day of the week, and it's just between 2 and 4 reps. Throughout the year, we'll kind of vary the start position and some things we're doing with the sprints. Maybe add a little bit of reactivity with it, or have a partner so they can chase them down. But I want them to ultimately get a couple reps of a max effort, short 10-yard sprint, just to express that quality. I don't know how much all of the guys get it in practice or in a game, and I think it's just one or 2 short bursts, and it's basically serves as our plyometric metric for the day. It's two or three short 10-yard sprints, and same with hockey. We'll usually kick off our second day of the week with a different sprint variation. Could be a half kneeling sprint, a lateral start, a bound into a sprint. But again, just a quick, explosive 10-yard sprint with max intent.
Love it, man. Simple. That sounded pretty simple to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we want people to be fast and explosive and get faster, like, we have to allow them to express it in the gym. And a lot of people will bank on certain exercises with weights that are going to develop power and explosiveness and speed. And I think they can help. Like, there's no denying that certain lifts will help you get faster and all that. But I mean, if you look at a sprint, there's nothing that's going to develop more explosiveness, more speed, where you can express force like a sprint. So let them do it in a controlled setting where it's safe. And if you do it again in your off season, they're prepared, 2 to 3 10-yard sprints in season, I think it's only going to help them.
Yeah, that's great. And again, don't be afraid. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, that's great, man. That's great. So you know me. I'm gonna have to ask you some questions. We're gonna take a couple minutes, just talk specifically about your work with the rowing team, and so that way I can scratch that itch, and because I'm always curious, I always like to learn more about what other coaches are doing and the things they think are important for rowers. So, let's just talk a little bit about your work with the rowing team and what you learned and some of the things you kind of prioritize from a program design standpoint.
Yeah, so I learned a lot, and I think first and foremost how tough and grueling of a sport rowing is. Man, I grew a whole new appreciation for that. I have never seen anything like it before. You walk in the boathouse. I would walk in there at like 5:30 in the morning, and people are dripping sweat, bringing a boat back in, and just the way these athletes were able to train and grind and everything. It was impressive to me. So just their overall work ethic and the way they can train and push through that comfort zone. It was impressive to me, and then that's what really drew me to the sport itself. When it came to training them, I had to realize this early is that, rowing, the sport itself always came first. So even in the off season, we could be months and months away from competition, championship seasons. Their training on the erg, on the water, it was most important. And that was going to be what was stressed. So, at certain times when I thought maybe it'd be good idea to spend more time in the weight room and focus more on some strength conditioning work that isn't super specific to rowing, and just get them in different positions, postures, give their bodies a little bit of a break. They were still on the ergs usually twice a day, and practicing, and whether it was with coach or not with coach, it was just in their mind, in their culture, what they were going to do. So, I realized that pretty early on. So for me, I think the biggest thing was one of the most important things was being able to consistently train them, at least once a week in season, and get them for twice a week when we were in the fall. So being able to see them twice a week in the fall and at least once a week in season was huge, even if those sessions were short, just to get them in the weight room, try to help them with some things, and talk to them about things they could do on their own time that are going to help them feel better for the weekend. And as far as specific things we did, and I spent a lot of time on that I think really helped us stay healthy and give their bodies a little bit of what they needed. Things like crawling, reaching, breathing, putting them in a bear position, just to strengthen the serratus all around the rib area, reaching, protracting through the shoulders. I think that was huge, and letting those shoulders move and move free. I'm not sure, if it was great. I didn't do any research or studying on it, but we were healthier than we were in previous years, which could be a number of reasons. But for me, I think like strengthening those areas, the serratus particularly, was big. And if I could go back to rowing, it's something I definitely would dive more into. And I also realized how much time they spend getting in and out of flexion, extension, rotating. Like that's the name of the game for them. So for me, we did a lot of anti-flexion, anti-extension, anti-rotation. If I can teach them and get them a little bit stronger, resisting those positions, I felt like it was going to bring them back to a better posture outside of the boat and make them stronger when they were in the boat.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yep, go ahead, Joe. Okay, yeah. So
go ahead, buddy. I'll let you finish up. I got a question or two.
Yep. So our strength training, it was more general. I looked at these athletes just like any other athletes, and as they were great rowers, and some of them were national. They were elite. They were Olympic level rowers. But from a weight room standpoint and their experience in the gym, they weren't elite. They were good athletes. They were average in the weight room, and there was still a ton of room to improve and grow. So, spending 1 year with them, we kind of stuck with the basics like we talked about. We squatted, we trap bar deadlifted, we did RDLs, lunging, leg curls, push, pull. We did a lot of landmine work, medicine balls, all the stuff that you would typically see with other athletes. We still did them with rowers. And I thought for them too, just getting them to become a better athlete outside the boat would develop them, a little bit better in the boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I like it. And a lot of the stuff you're talking about, especially with jumping and medicine ball throws and stuff like that, for a sport where you're spending so much time in a seated position, a lot of this stuff, you got them on their feet. Which right there is just huge in terms of they're in a completely different, position, pattern, posture than they normally would be in their sport. So a couple questions. So you mentioned the crawling, reaching, and breathing. So, coming down, I'm sure you took some time and checked out practice and stuff at the boathouse or on the water. So is there something that jumped out at you? You thought putting those things in the program would be beneficial. I think it's really interesting and creative, using crawling for getting some good work around the serratus. And then it sounds like, from a coaching perspective, you were trying to really emphasize and educate them on proper scapular, movement, the shoulder blades going, around the rib cage and learning to feel what that should be like as an athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of hit the nail on the head when it comes to educating them on the goal of why we're doing what we're doing and explaining it to them that way. And, when you can talk their language, especially with a rower, I think that's huge. So, with the crawling and the reaching drills, again, just trying to strengthen the serratus in a way that they're not doing it in the boat, 100 million reps a day. I thought it was huge. You get them to stabilize through the hips, through the core. You're preventing a lot of anti-extension, anti-flexion, anti-rotation in those movements too. So from a bang for your buck standpoint, you can kind of check a lot of boxes in one movement. And for them, when everything is all the movements they do are almost max effort, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of tension built up, in that boat. How can I get some exercises that are kind of the other end of the spectrum and bring them back down at the end of the session? And I think these crawling, reaching, and breathing drills do a good job of getting them out of a high stress environment into a more relaxed state where they can kind of just wind down basically and feel better and get back to like a neutral state of recovery and out of a stressful situation.
That's great. Matt, could you just give, in case the audience isn't familiar, could you give an example of what you mean by like reaching, like an exercise or something you would do with the athletes, just so the audience can wrap their head around that one?
Yeah, so a lot of the drills we'll set them up. So I'll go some ground-based ones. We'll set up in a quadruped position. So you're on the ground on all fours with your hands under your shoulders, and we'll basically have them lift their knees about 1 inch off the floor. And from here, they're going to reach their hands through the floor and almost create like a rounded upper back. And you'll see the scaps will no longer be coming together. It'll look like they're going apart from each other. And you'll feel like you're pushing away from the ground. And in that position, I'll tell them to take a big inhale into their upper back, a 3 to 5 second inhale, and a big, strong exhale as they continue to reach through the floor. And that's one of the drills we'll use. Another one we'll do is a landmine press, where, again, the scap can move freely. And as they press, they're just going to reach a little bit longer at the top of that press. And again, you'll feel the scap move on the blade. And if you're looking at it from the back, you'll see the exact movement, the exact upward rotation that we're looking for in that movement. So the landmine work and the quadruped reaching through the floor, two of the big ones that we used. Nice.
I like that. For the reaching, obviously they're really rooting, pushing into the floor. Did you have them do anything where they might go down to one limb and then do like a little bit of an extension with one of their arms?
Yep. So we would do a lot of different movements with it. That was like our level 1 progression. We'd start there. We would do it from a single arm stance. So they'd continue reaching their left hand into the floor, and with their right hand, we'd have them just raise it straight up. We'd have them raise it out like the letter Y, and then we'd have them raise out to the side. those different ones. At times they'd raise it and touch the opposite shoulder, and we'd build time under tension. So we'd go for like a 30-second hold, things like that, or 5 big inhales, 5 big exhales. We would do a lot of going back to some things we talked about years ago, like some of the Stuart McGill work, just getting them to reach through like in a bird dog, bring the knees down to the floor and continue reaching as you extend your one arm out and one leg out. I still want them to actively reach and push through the floor on their opposite arm. So just kind of working it into different exercises is a way we would use it as well.
Yeah. And the big thing I'm hearing from you is, these aren't like, you're not talking about any groundbreaking exercise, but the thing that is coming across that's super critical is you spent a lot of time just sharing about the setup and the execution and the intent of when you're doing those things.
Yeah, that's where it's at. It's a lot of these exercises, they're not super sexy. They're definitely not the most fun to do. You're certainly not going to get a big pump when you do it either. And there's not going to be much weight, in your hands or on a bar. But like you mentioned, man, the intent, the attention to detail, that stuff is critical. And it's something I always preach to our athletes, especially with these exercises. If you just go through the motions with no intent, no attention to detail, they're not going to help you. There's going to be no benefit. We might as well not even do them. But if you have great intent, you focus on the details, you listen to the coaching cues we give out, and you can hammer away, you're going to see a benefit. You're going to feel better. And I think that's huge. Like the attention to detail. As a coach, we have to cue it well, explain it well, and tell them why they're doing it. But on their end, the detail and the intent has to be there. And if it's not, there's going to be no benefit to it.
Nice. Yeah. Super, super important. Last two, what did you do from a jump or plyometric and medicine ball standpoint?
So medicine balls and jumps, I guess you could say this was pretty simple too, but we would do different types of throws. So like a squat throw, you basically hold the ball at your chest, rapidly drop down to a squat and jump up and throw it as high as you can. So that's one variation. We would do a scoop toss. So the ball would be on the floor and you would drop down, grab the ball and underhand throw it up in the sky as high as you can. Again, you're getting triple extension. We would do slams, your traditional slams, and we would do some broad jump throws. You set up like you're about to broad jump, shift your hips back, and boom, broad jump and throw the ball at the same time. And we would also we started off doing throws from a kneeling position actually too. Kneeling overhead throw, kneeling broad throw, kneeling slam, kneeling rotational throws. And then from a jump standpoint, box jumps, depth drops, depth jumps. And then as the season went on and we got deeper, I kind of used extensive hurdle jumps. So we'd set up like 5 to 10 hurdles across the gym or across the pavement. And I would tell the guys and girls to get up as high as they can and be quick off the floor and stick their last rep. So just kind of progressing how explosive we were as the season went on.
Nice. Yeah, so that last one with the hurdles and then sticking it, that became actually pretty reactive.
It was, yes. It became more reactive, and this is something we'll have to touch on later at a different time. We'll kind of pick each other's brains on this, but yeah, it was more of a reactive, like quick off the ground, still get up fast and be explosive. Just be quick off the floor, and again for them, as rowers, this was actually a challenging movement that it took us a while to progress into. Like early in the season, we might do a single, line up like 3 hurdles, and they would stick each rep, and then they'd go continuous, from there. But it took us a while to get a feel for how this movement should look, how it should feel, and what it should, ultimately like the benefit we're trying to get out of it. It took us a while to build up to that because it's something they haven't done, virtually ever for a lot of them.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just as a frame of reference for anybody listening to, how high are the hurdles? 12, 18, 24 inches?
So we only had 12-inch hurdles. They were 12-inch hurdles, so they weren't high. And actually, no, this is a great point too. Same with the boxes we used. As much as a lot of the athletes want to jump up to a 42, 48, 50-inch box, man, I've seen the most benefit, setting up like a 30-inch box where it's not super high, but they jump the right way, and it's not about tucking their knees up to their chest and landing in a total deep squat. And for rowers, this was actually a good conversation we had with the team. Is I told them I don't want them to land in that basically that compressed position that they're always in, and they would ask why. This is so similar to being in a boat. And I kind of explained to them, why I want them to just jump and land in an athletic position. Save those exact moments for when they're in the boat. They do them 1,000 times a day. They don't need any more of it with me. If we can just express an explosive, powerful jump, land in a good athletic position, we're going to see benefits just by doing that.
That's great, man. Yeah, that's great. That was awesome. We got to pick your brain a ton there on the rowing front. So thank you for being an open book and sharing all that information and knowledge there. I think last area just to kind of touch on is probably just periodization, coming back around to that, and just any there's tons of different philosophies and methodologies around periodization. So I guess I'll just turn it over to you, and you can kind of share your thoughts on it.
Yeah. So you mentioned different methods and ways to doing things, and especially like we'll look at a lot of our interns, and I'll ask them what they're reading or what do they like to program, and the first thing they'll say is Triphasic or West Side and all this stuff, which is great. Like those are great programs. And for me personally, I tell them that I'm not a triphasic guy. I'm not a West Side 5-3-1 Olympic lifting, bodybuilding, functional, speed, agility, speed ladder. I'm not one of those guys. I tell them that I'm an everything guy, and I kind of do what I think is best for the athlete and best for the team, and I pick and pull from all those different realms of training. And if you look at some of my programs, you'll see eccentrics, sprinkled in throughout the whole year. You'll see isometrics throughout the whole year. You'll see some of the main lifts like powerlifting lifts, and maybe some of the way I utilize percentages, based on some powerlifting methods. You'll see some bodybuilding methods mixed in there with drop sets and hypertrophy type work, and work capacity and density training, and you'll see things from all different realms of trainings. And I think as a coach, you don't want to pigeonhole and label yourself as one guy, because that's exactly what you do. You pigeonhole yourself, and you're missing out on so many other ways to make your athletes better. So we can kind of learn, pick, pull, and use bits and pieces from everything. And I feel like if you could do that in a systematic way without having a program that is super scrambled, then you're going to build a pretty robust, efficient athlete. And ultimately athletes need to get stronger. They need to get faster. They have to be able to decelerate. A lot of times they have to gain muscle mass. So, if we look at the best ways to do this, they come from all these different methods or systems of training. How can I, pick and choose when I want to emphasize one, or how can I pick and choose certain points to utilize these methods into a program? You hear all these different 3-letter acronyms like FRC, FMS, PRI, like all these different ones that are about movement and breathing and posture and position. And it's the same thing, right? We don't want to have our athletes on the floor breathing and getting into these crazy different mobility positions for an hour, and they haven't touched a weight, they haven't ran, they haven't jumped, they haven't done anything that's really going to bring a big adaptation and help them in that sense. So again, you're just picking and pulling from different systems, different methods, different people, other coaches, and making that work well within your own system, within your setting. And I think as a young coach, you have to be able to kind of learn about these different systems and philosophies and methods, and you mess around with them on your own and see what you like, what you don't like, and what clicks with you as a coach, and ultimately be able to be comfortable programming it and helping other people utilize it.
Yeah, that's that last part there I think is really critical. You talked about, it's good to expose yourself to learning, what's out there and everything, but you got to find, what you believe in, what works well for you, and what you kind of identify with as a coach. And, the other thing is, can you teach it? Are you able to turn that around and help the athlete and help them get better?
Yeah, that's huge. And you have to be able to teach it. And, just because you read a book, it doesn't mean you're qualified to, teach it to a bunch of college student athletes. Like that's not a great situation to be in. And I'm only 29 years old. So, I've read a bunch of books, and there may be things I have read, but I haven't done yet, for myself personally, enough time in my training. And I'm not going to implement those things with any of our athletes because I haven't done it long enough, on myself, and I'm not comfortable teaching it to them. So I'm not going to implement those things yet. And, you might see a lot of flashy things on Instagram and social media that look awesome and look cool, but unless you've spent time doing it and you've been through, exactly what it's going to feel like for you to go through it, I wouldn't recommend putting your athletes through that same stuff.
Yeah, man, I'm the same way. I cannot put something in a program. I just don't feel comfortable trying to communicate or teach it if I haven't been through it myself. I'll be the lab rat. I'll test on myself first and experiment, take some time before I introduce it. Because I just, to your point, you're doing a disservice to your clients or your athletes if you're not, sure, or you don't have good command of what you're trying to teach.
Yeah, and if you want to experiment on stuff, like use yourself and use your other strength conditioning coaches on your staff, or find a buddy who's not one of your student athletes and experiment on them before you want to mess around. But yeah, and going back to your point about having confidence and command as a coach, like you want to be confident with what you're presenting, because ultimately every time you're up there is a presentation, and if you can't demo certain things well, and you don't have an intern next to you who can demo it really well, you probably shouldn't have that in your program right now.
Yeah. Well said. Matt, man, this has been a blast. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, man, I appreciate having me on. It was a long time coming. I'm so glad we made it happen. And during this crazy time, yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I just remembered, we spent 90 minutes and we didn't talk about any of the challenges with the pandemic. So maybe just spend a couple minutes talking about that and how that had affected your season. I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. So yeah, I mean, it's obviously a crazy time in the world. And a lot of it is much bigger now than strength and conditioning, but it affected a lot of our seasons pretty hard. We had a lacrosse team who is number 3 in the country, basically spent the last 3 years training for this year, more or less. And we were seeing it come to life, and the season got cut short. Our women's hockey team had just won the ECAC championship for the first time in program history. We were getting ready to head to Northeastern for the Elite 8 of women's hockey, and we were destined for a big finish. And the day we're about to leave, the whole season gets cut out. Tennis teams who were ranked in the top in the country, men's and women's tennis, and their season got cut short. And football, we were entering spring ball. We had a huge spring. The guys were super hungry coming off an 8-2. They were disappointed after an 8-2 season, and they were crushing the spring. And then this happened right before spring ball. My soccer team was really focusing up on training. Like the weight room was developing a big time culture shift for them. We were seeing just a massive shift in the soccer team's culture, and the weight room was a big part of it. And all these different teams were affected, and it affected teams throughout the whole country, through the world, all over. So it was a rough thing, and now I think we're a couple months into it, and it comes down to us as strength conditioning coaches, and anyone really in this field should be giving a huge effort into connecting with people in the field, but also connecting with our athletes. Sending a text message every week or so, checking in on them, seeing how they're doing, seeing if there's different ways we can help them. continuing to learn and grow. I mean, there's so many different podcasts that are coming out every day, different webinars, seminars that are coming out. And as coaches, if we're not investing time into this so we can grow and get better during this time, we're doing a major disservice to the athletes. I was listening to, it might have been a podcast or a webinar the other day, and talking about just being positive, being present, being prepared in these moments, and like be a positive person, right? It's so easy to sit down on the couch and complain about what's going on in the world, and the government's doing this, the president, the governor, why is my state shut down? It's really easy to complain, but if we can be a positive voice for our families, for our athletes, for everyone out there, I think that goes a long way. And just being present, like be in the moment and use this time to really be productive and grow. And the things we do now, we might not see a benefit from it today or tomorrow, but 5, 6, 7, 8 months down the road is when we'll see these benefits. And ultimately for me, I want to be as productive as I can for myself, for my athletes, my family, my girlfriend, like all that stuff. And if I can always be present and be positive, I know I'm going to make a difference and hopefully have a positive impact on all these different people.
That's great, man. Yeah. Well, thank you for catching us up and kind of filling us in about how things, were impacted at the university level, and then, for you, personally, professionally there and stuff. And glad to hear that, you're, stable and settle for the time being and making the most use of the free time that we have, which is usually a pretty precious resource and commodity for any coach. So that's great to hear. Thank you for listening to the Leo Training Podcast. If this content is important to you, please be sure to rate and review so more people can listen. Also, you may follow me on social media, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook to get weekly free content. For more in-depth content, please subscribe to my email newsletter at my website, leotraining.io. Be sure to check out the resources page to download free, helpful content. If you have any questions or feedback, please contact me directly by email at joe@leotraining.io or via Instagram. The handle is @leotraining. Thank you again for listening, and have a great day.